Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. I'm delighted today to introduce you to Kimberly McCormick. Now, Kim is a multifaceted individual who has such a wide range of pursuits and interests and talents. So she's working at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. But she's also a singer-songwriter and an entrepreneur, and she is setting up a group for diabetics. But today, Kimberly, you're going to talk to me about race and racism and the Black Lives Matter movement, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I
So
am.
welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining me to talk about this. It's so important.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm really happy to be with you. And I wanted to say this so your audience can hear it, is I am absolutely geeked over your name, Magnificent Midlife. I think that is the coolest name for a group. So you got to have some rocking people in your group because I love that name.
Oh, fantastic. Now I'm just going to explain how I came across you, because
Okay,
we only met very, very recently,
right.
but we're both in a marketing group on Facebook,
Hmm.
and you were speaking on a Facebook Live, and I just felt that what you said was so powerful, and the way that you said it, you were able to get through to a very defensive white person and to enable that very defensive white person to hear what you had to say and to listen and to contemplate making change.
Mm.
And your voice, it was so powerful for me to listen to you. So I really wanted to share your voice and your thoughts with my audience, with my community. And first off, before we hit record, today you seem a lot more upbeat than I've seen you recently. But I
Hmm.
wanted to just tap into that because some of the things that you've been putting out on your page on Facebook, you've seemed very sad, and I wanted to start there with why you're so sad and how has it been for you?
Well, thank you for asking that question. It's the culmination of the activities that people are seeing come to a head now are really the representation of over 400 years of being in an oppressed state of being as people of color, African Americans, Black, in the United States. And as a result of that, when you think if you've been hurt by something over and over and over again, and I don't want to, I've said this before, and I use this sparingly because I know people have been affected by it, but if you're in a situation where you've been abused and it has happened over and over and over again, and you've cried for help for so long and no one heard you, pretty soon you get to a point of hopelessness to a degree. You know, I'm a woman of faith and I always have that to fall back on, but I'm human as well. And I think with that comes the reality of my duality, if I can say it that way, where I have to exist in a space where I'm here trying to do the things I'm supposed to do. I'm being kind to people. I'm doing all the things that we think we're ascribed to do to fit in the world, and the world just seems to reject you. So when you've kind of been living with that posture for so long, you kind of really develop a place of sadness where you have to kind of work at getting up to do business as usual every day. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And with that, when we think about the culmination of events that happened with Black Lives Matter specifically, what is pointedly causing all the eruption of emotions right now is really the culminating death of George Floyd. We already had a series of events that happened in a short period of time that people may think is just happening, but the truth of the matter is this has been happening for 400 years. It's just the fact that now we have technology to catch some things that weren't able to be seen before. And as a result of all that, black people, African American people, and I'm speaking for me, I like to start off with that. I'm speaking from my experience because everybody's experience is different. But I think from a cumulative perspective, we all were at a point where as soon as we saw the world notice, it was almost as if the world recognized we had been on fire all these years. And it was almost like a, somewhat of an exhale, somewhat of a relief that, oh my God, someone's finally paying attention. So I think if you want to attribute it to that, it's just all the emotions coming back from that, and just thinking about my mom and my parents and my grandparents and their parents and years before that are now gone on, and their tears are crying out from the grave, and we're here in this present time in 2020 representing all that they sacrificed on our behalf, and they aren't here to be able to see that, hey, the world is paying attention. So it's been encouraging, especially since you saw me on that live. It's been extremely encouraging for people such as yourself, Rachel, and many others who are expressing their sentiment about, hey, we don't like this either. We think it's wrong. We disagree as well. It's almost like gaining alliances that you did not know. You knew people were probably there, but their fear of saying something just kept us feeling like nobody cared. That was a long explanation, but that really kind of summarizes why the sadness. And along with that, with some people, is extreme anger because everybody's journey is different. Everyone has had a different experience along this journey. And all of those experiences are the culmination of who you are now. So someone else could have had something way personal, like they may have had a relative that died, in such a tragic manner. And so for them, their emotions are elevated. My experiences are different in other ways, but I have them. So that explains, I hope that gives you a better perspective on the sadness and why the frustration and the anger and things like that. And so that's why you were seeing that.
But I think it's so powerful to understand that and hear that from you, because people see things, they see events in isolation. If we're not living it as you are living it, as
Hmm.
your community is living it,
Hmm.
we don't know, we don't understand where the weight and the depth of that emotion comes from.
Right, right, right. I totally get that. All this week, there have been many different conversations I've been a part of, even within my work environment, where people, luckily, because everybody's not doing this, people have shared. And some of the things I have heard from my own colleagues, African American colleagues, was heartbreaking. Everybody has had an experience, and they have been some of the most tragic you could ever think of. And all of this to me really is, I know it's about politics, it was about economics at the heart of it all, how it started, how we got here, how we were brought here, we didn't choose to come here, all that kind of stuff. But at the core of it now, it's like, if your heart is moved when you see something wrong, I don't care if the person is green, purple, blue, yellow, or red, it should do something to you as a human being, first of all, to to make you want to do something or want to say something. So yeah, it's been a learning curve for those we have been expressing it to, because you can't know if you don't walk it, and you've never walked it. There's no way for you to know. But the I think the beauty of what's happening now is that I feel, and again I'm speaking for myself, I feel a lot more people are listening. I feel a lot more people are willing to say in an open forum, you know what, I hear you. I hear you. I feel you. I might not be able to empathize with you, but my level of sympathy, and nobody's looking for sympathy, but I'm just distinguishing between the two words. You can only walk in my shoes through empathy. but you can certainly feel what I'm going through by me expressing to you the impact it's had on me as a person, and potentially my family and my cousins, and things of that nature. So it's quite a journey. I sometimes wonder how my ancestors made it. Honestly, I really do, and it lets me know that we are some of the strongest, most resilient people on this planet, because you don't persevere through 400 years of oppression and have people still coming out trying to make things happen. That's a powerful statement to make as a people, I believe.
I really do believe that, well, I hope that people are beginning to listen. I mean, just my own personal experience, I always thought I was fairly racially aware.
Hmm.
You know, I have a mixed race son.
Hmm.
He's half Chinese,
Okay.
so he's not black, but he is, mixed race.
Hmm.
I've lived all over the world. I live in a very diverse place in London.
Hmm.
You know, I have black friends, but the last 2 3 weeks have completely shifted everything for me,
Hmm.
because I have finally, by listening to women like you and other people, just realized the extent of my privilege,
Hmm.
and realize the extent of your pain.
Hmm.
And these
Hmm.
things, it's so easy for us to live in these bubbles where we
Right.
don't we
Right.
don't interact. And
Right.
how we met was because somebody had been accused of using completely inappropriate language,
Hmm.
and there was it was a certain set of circumstances. But trying to explain to somebody that their use of language was detrimental and was harmful potentially, and just the level of ignorance to still be using that kind
Hmm.
of language.
Hmm.
But this is, at least people are, I think, now listening, and the fact that you're my second podcast on this, and I'm passionate about it now. I just want to talk about it. I want to get people to listen and learn and find out and
Hmm.
understand.
Hmm. Hmm. I am encouraged again by Rachel, by individuals such as yourself and many others that I've encountered that are genuinely like engaged and really are at the point where I really want to understand. I've heard what you said so many times now, until it's almost like another confirming situation where people are like, I didn't realize how good I had it, if I can say it that way. I didn't realize
Mm-hmm.
how much I was really able to do, because I never thought about it through the lens of somebody who wasn't able to do that. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and with that in mind, I think the challenge that rests upon both communities is, one is coming to a realization, and one is coming to a point of justification. you know, in the fact that one side is knowing things they got to do, another side is like, oh my God, people are finally listening. Now what do we do differently? We there's some give and take on both sides. I believe there's a huge learning curve to our posture, because, as I said before, this is the first time with the world in my lifetime, and because technology has afforded it, to appear to really like be paying attention. And it really is, it's something. And I'm hopeful. I know some people say cautiously optimistic, and I'm hopeful because if I don't hold on to my hope, I'll make myself sick. You know what I mean? And that goes to something that you asked me we probably be talking about later, which is the impact of going through all these things. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but I'm cautious, and I'm not naive. I want to say that too, because I know there's some people who could care less if anything changes about this, and they could care less about me or anybody who looks like me. And I'm not naive to think that there are not people who think that. But I'm so much more, uh, I don't have a better word to use than hopeful, because I think it's just simply states. So I'm so much more hopeful for those who are expressing that they do. I read something today. I can't remember who posted it, but it was someone who posted, and what they did is they walked back through their life of all of the points where they realized they did or said something that was inappropriate, and the reality of where they are now, and recognizing the harm that it could have caused, which kind of does a couple of things for me. It says, at the point where we know we're doing something wrong, we know we're doing something wrong. Nobody has to tell you that. But acknowledging it now, and acknowledging it in public, and saying, not only do I recognize it, and I know that it is wrong, and I know that it was hurtful. And now I'm sharing this because I hope someone else can see themselves in what I said, and recognize that you too may need to readjust your thinking, and readjust the way you view people, and the lens with which you see them could be so much different than the limitations in which you've put on them, simply by something that was told to you from a previous generation, or however your biases have come to be. Because we all want the same thing. We all want to live in safe communities. We all want to do well in society. We all, for the most part, I know bad people have bad intentions, but I think for the most part, as a human race, we all want the same things. And we are much more alike than we are different. But it's until we can see each other in that lens and come to appreciate our differences. You'll never look at me and see me as somebody that's white, because I'm not. I'll never look at you and not see you as somebody black, because you're not. But the fact that I can look at you and I can appreciate you and I can say, hey, Rachel, instead of giving you some other name, hey, Rachel, because that's what your name is. You're Rachel. And that's what, I want to be able to dialogue in that manner. And I want to be able to be free where somebody can say, Kim, can I ask you a question? And you be comfortable enough to ask. Because all at the core of all this, to me, is our lack of communicating about the unknown. Just completely taking a posture of fear by design, and not taking the courage to ask a question. Because there are many people who look like me who wouldn't don't even want to talk about this right now. Probably don't want to hear because they've heard enough. I'm at a place where I'm like, let's talk about it. Because if you're interested, I want to talk. I want you to hear what I'm saying. I want you to hear what I'm saying, and I want to understand from which you see it, so that we can see, we can get to a common place where you can comprehend and feel and understand. Is it's not about trying to beat somebody down with the message or anything like that. It's just like a realization, an actualization, or just coming to a point of knowing, you know what, that is that is something I've probably done before in my life. That's the kind of stuff that makes me go, now people are getting it.
But you are very generous in that respect. And gosh, I'm coming across with privilege probably even by saying that, because a lot
Yeah.
of the communities that I'm in on Facebook,
Hmm.
a lot of, it's mainly women, but black women in there, when there are, white women like me coming forward and saying, I want to learn, tell me this, tell me that, the other, they say, well, hang on a minute, it's not my job to
Hmm.
teach you.
Hmm.
There's all of these resources. Go Google it. Go
Yeah.
find out.
Yeah.
Don't take from me. It's not my job to teach you. And that sometimes, for the white women, I can see them going, oh, but I was trying to be nice. and and then we get into that whole white fragility, which is something
Hmm.
I have learned in the last 2 weeks. I
Hmm.
didn't know anything about that. But this idea, this defensiveness that we go into, that, well, I want to learn, so tell me. But actually, your community, the black communities, fed up with trying to explain.
Yeah.
And, so you are very generous in the fact that you're still willing to talk to people like me and educate people like me.
Yeah, I've heard that word used, and so many people posted it when I said something. I was like, really? Am I generous? And I guess,
I'm not the first person to say that.
no, you're not. You're not. You're not. And it doesn't bother me at all, because, like I told you, I was brought up by a leader of people. And I believe, I still believe that the human race has the capacity to do better. I believe that we have the capacity to be better. I also am completely 100% aware of the fact that people in my community are extremely angry, and for all the reasons I've said before. People are
Mm.
mad. They could be directly connected to somebody who was recently killed or lost as a result of some of these atrocities you see. So of course their posture is going to be different from mine. I understand it. I totally understand it. And nor would I ever say they don't have the right to feel that way. So I think it's in finding that everybody's not going to come at it that way, but just being aware that, when you hear that, just stop and say 400 years.
Yeah.
Just stop
Yeah.
and think 400 years.
Mm.
And allow yourself to give that person grace. And they may go on and on and on and on. And there's such a phrase as an angry black woman. I know I've heard it. I'm sure it's a stigma that goes. I get that. I get that. But keep reminding yourself, with this, we've been on fire for so long and nobody's watched or listened or said anything. You've got to allow people the time to exhale. And that's what's going on right now. It's a lot of exhaling in our community and a lot of things being shared. People got a lot of different opinions about it and a lot of different approaches to it. This will probably always be my approach. It won't be everybody's. And I can't hold them accountable to how they approach it because I have not walked in their shoes. I've only walked in mine. But I'm willing to do whatever I can if people are willing to learn, because I believe that's the only way we're going to be able to cross over somewhere else into this new normal that I hope continues, is the fact that we have conversations like this and we do have relationships where people can say, "Can I just sit down? Can we just talk? Can we talk black white? Can we just talk?" Cuz I want to understand. And when that happens, I'm like, "Okay, let's talk." Cuz I don't expect you to know no more than I would know about your experience in English. I'm not English. I didn't
Mm.
go. I got to ask, like I asked you today about an acronym. I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't
Mm.
know. I didn't know. And I think if we are in a posture we kind of give each other grace through this whole thing on both sides of the equation, it's going to take us a lot farther. But there's some people who are just angry, and you got to respect where they are. You got to respect where they are and just align yourself with people who are willing to tell you. And when you get somebody that comes at you with a fire hose, just go, okay, 400 years. I get it. I don't know a better way to explain that. Just, I get it. I get it. I'll just, I'll step back. I'll regroup. I'll try to align myself with someone else because I want to keep learning. If it's important enough to keep learning, that incident in and of itself won't shut you down. If you really want to know, you won't allow that to shut you down.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's it in a nutshell.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it truly, that is, I've heard that so many times, but it is true. I think it now becomes more of a desire of how badly do people really want to see change. And I really think that there's enough. When I'm waking up in the morning and I'm seeing posts in my stream from New Zealand and Australia and Japan, and people posting all kinds of things that are pretty much saying, "Hey, Black Lives Matter, we're with you. We understand I can't breathe." All the things that are symbolic of what's going on right now. And I don't want people to get stuck on that word symbolic either, because it's not supposed to be like just a flag or a tree or anything like that. It's just something that represents a communal voice that you're hearing right now that says, "Hey, we hear you. We're with you." And then if on the other side, there's grace extended on both sides to understand what's going on over here, and for us to understand when people say, "Hey, I want to learn," that we got to get to a place. Everybody's not there. Everybody may not ever get there. So aligning with people who are willing to talk, I think is going to be the best resort.
And to what extent do you think that at the same time as this is happening, we're all in a global pandemic? To what extent do you think that that situation has actually enabled us to go, okay, I'm going to listen to this now?
Mm. I think that, again, I'm a woman of faith. I think that, first of all, let's take something very literal. This is the year 2020. I'm sure people had all kinds of things they were thinking about doing for graduations and weddings, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do on the 20th of this month. I'm sure there was so many plans in the works, but God was like, okay, let's shut it all down because you all are behaving badly, very, very badly, and we need to shut this thing down, and we need to try to do a reset here because you haven't gotten it. And you need to get this because your very existence as a world is dependent upon your response, not your reaction, your response to this moment. I believe that, and the fact that this pandemic came, it already had everybody like captive at home. People never been on their computers more. People never been at home cooking more with their families, driving less. The air's never been cleaner. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So that's why I kind of align it to the whole concept of a reset because this stuff wouldn't have happened. That would not have happened if the whole world had not shut down. So now we got clean air. What else do we need to clean up, Rachel?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. I know. Yeah, yeah.
We got clean air.
And guess how quickly that happened? For
Yes,
years and years, we said, oh no, we can't do that. We can't, sort out the environment, bring on the global pandemic, and whoopee do. We just,
exactly.
instant environmental improvement.
Exactly. And so heartbreaking that it had to come with such an enormous loss of life.
Mm,
And the people that died as a result of the complications from it. And the combination of these two was such an unlikely occurrence. I mean, no one could have seen this come. I guess a scientist could. I work at CDC, as people say they could. But overall, I don't think anybody could have predicted something like this would happen at the same time.
I know, I know,
At the same time,
I know.
it is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling, but it was absolutely arresting at the same time, you know?
Mm,
It was absolutely arresting. That whole pandemic just shut us down.
mm,
And now here we are with this situation which has just shook the world up. You know,
mm,
it's having us come to a place of reckoning, if I can say it that way, to really
mm,
determine what are we going to do now?
mm.
What are we going to do now? Are we going to make it better, or are we going to go on with business as usual? Because that wasn't working.
I don't think there is any business as usual. I mean, I think that has well and truly gone out the flipping window.
I really hope so, Rachel. I mean, again, I'm
Mm,
hopeful. I am hopeful. I am hopeful, and I see a lot of things going on, and a lot of corporations and people are talking about folks jumping on the bandwagon and all this kind of stuff like that. I'm hopeful to believe that the human heart can only take being punctured so long, because ours could. The eruption of emotion has come from people's hearts just being broken
mm,
and being living in a broken place to the point where all this eruption comes from it. And I'm hoping people's hearts are just as broken on the opposing sides, wherever your position was, to make you feel like, you know what, if I feel it, what is somebody else feeling? What has it really done to them? How is
mm.
it really impacting them? Are you talking about people's health? You want me to go on into that and speaking about health and the connection?
Yeah, go ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so here's again Kim's perspective on things. And again, when we look at the way in which we were bought, and I use that, and transported to this country, and the emotional turmoil that had to come through when fathers were lined up on a ship and separated from their families, and that's the stability of the family, the father. And when you look at that and you think about they left their families, that's the beginning of a level of stress. No technology back then, but I know worrying was worrying back in 1600s just like it's worrying in 2020. And the impact it can have on your physical body can really start to show. And it goes
Mm,
physical and then it goes here. So when you think about all those things and having to live again 400 years under an
mhm,
oppressive state of always trying to do more. We got to be twice as fast, do twice as much, be three times as good to get recognized half as often. That is the mantra in an African American community that you will hear a lot. When you
Mm.
do that and you're constantly climbing, you're trying to climb, you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to do it, whether you work at an hourly position or whether you work at a career position, you still could be trying to do the best you can. And as some speakers said before, all this time you climbing, only to realize your ladder is up against the wrong building, or somebody completely moves the whole thing when you get there, and it's like, what do you mean I got to start over? But
Mm.
this is what everybody else is doing and it's working. Why won't it work for me? When you think about all those things and the stress that comes along with it, that's why I believe in the African American community you can have things like hypertension and diabetes and all these other, what they call in the science community, comorbidities, things that are like underlying health conditions that absolutely challenge our health. And we're trying to live through all of this.
Mm.
Through. We still got to keep climbing, not knowing when we get up, everything may be completely moved. The rug may be pulled under you in one place. The building may be moved to a whole nother neighborhood, but we still keep going.
Mm.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, that begins to take a toll.
Mm.
And all of us know that, we're made up of, mind, body, spirit. We're made up of a lot of different things to be a human being. And all of them need to be in some sort of balance sometimes. But if we're continuously on tilt
Mm.
in the way we've been functioning, your body's going to react to it.
Mm.
Absolutely, unequivocally, your body's going to react to it. And I think that is a direct result of why there could be a lot of conditions in the African American community as they exist. We were given food as scraps in the days when African Americans were slaves and they were serving. You would not get the best of the best. You got the scraps. So what was left over was what your family did. But we knew how to take the worst of what we were given and make the best out of it. And that's been the mantra. That's been the mantra. So the things we were getting weren't necessarily the best, but people were taking care of their families. They were loving their children. They were trying to take care of their communities. They were doing all the things that they knew that made family important, and they were doing the best they could with what they had. And it's a direct impact to me, absolutely direct impact.
Well, we all know what stress does, don't we? And when you, as you say, you've had 400 years of stress
Right. I mean, and,
with
and
no
I'm
let up, really.
right.
Have you just had no let up?
No let up. The pedal's been on the
Mm.
gas the whole time. And although
Mm.
I'm not 400 years old, but as I said, I'm looking here and speaking with you today as a representative in the flesh for every one of my ancestors who will never get a chance to see this day. So that's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of stress and us trying to do the right thing. And the more you try, in some instances, it just still is never enough. People can't, the human being was not meant to be under that much duress for any extended period of time. And then you compound it with these other things, and it gets to be too much for the body. It gets to be too much.
Now, you said earlier about, encouraging people to ask questions and step up to have the conversation.
Hmm.
Well, earlier this evening, we were having a little book club about the book Me and White Supremacy
Okay.
by Layla Sart, which is very powerful and has been teaching me about things like white fragility, tone policing, these sort of things that I had never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we were talking about, it was really interesting because we were all white women. There was five of us. We were all white women, but within the white world, we were quite diverse. We had two Americans, we had
Okay.
two Brits, and one South African. So we
Okay.
were quite diverse in a way,
Okay.
you know. And but one lady who has a background in social work and has been studying and is in New York City, um, was talking about the difficulty of knowing how people want to identify.
Mm.
And I think one of the where we get stuck, where white people get stuck, is not knowing how to name people.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many terms around now. And I was using the word black quite liberally in this book club, and somebody, confessed that they were a bit uncomfortable with that. And then there's African American, and then there's people of color, and now in Layla Saad's book there's the term called BIPOC. Have you come across that one?
I have. Could you? I believe I know what it stands for, but I want you to tell me because I
Black, indigenous, people of color.
see. I got the whole second letter wrong. Okay. All right. Okay. I thought something else. I got the people of color right, but I was different on the I. Okay.
So I'm going to ask you, how do you identify?
I identify as African American. I mean, I think at the core of it, this is one of those things. And Rachel, this is really gonna sound like I'm. No, it's gonna sound just like it's supposed to sound. So many people would have a totally different response to that question. So
But therefore, is it a good question to ask?
it is a good question to ask, and I think it's if you want to know, somebody may say, just call me Kim. At the core of
Yeah,
it,
well, yeah.
just call me my name. I'll answer to that. But if you want to identify,
If we're
if
talking about race, so it's in
yeah,
the context of a conversation about race.
in the context of race, I think Black and African American, at least for those of us in the States, is appropriate. I don't know what's appropriate outside of the country. I do affiliate with people from a lot of different countries before, and I never really asked that question about what they call people in other countries. I know in Japan, I think. Well, let me not say that because I've been to a couple, but I identify as Black or African American, and I think what has happened is this whole thing of and I use the word labels because I don't know a better way to try to define it right now to make my point. I think that in this instance, this is an earnest, honest question. You're like, I just want to
Yeah.
know what to call you because I don't know.
But also how, I'm writing about
Hmm. Hmm.
this.
Right.
And I don't want to get it wrong. I even
Right.
asked in one group, I said, if I'm capitalizing black, which is my instinct,
Mm,
then the editor in me wants to capitalize white. But
mm.
then you get into the white supremacists who capitalize white at the expense of black. And honestly, it's a minefield. I'm walking into it,
I
and it's
agree.
just kind of bombs going off all over the place.
I agree. It's one of those things like when you come to a new country and you're trying to learn a language and you can't figure out what's going on because some words mean the same thing and it's like, well, why? I can only tell you from my perspective, I am okay with Black or African American. I mean, I have seen the this is getting down to the semantics about whether the W should be capitalized because it makes one more superior than another. I guess is what you're kind of trying to say. So I guess you just make the B and the W lowercase and keep moving, Rachel. That's because it's gonna be different for me. It'll probably be different whomever you speak with. But as far as I'm concerned, Black and African American, for those of us who are in the States, is an okay way to apply. If you're writing, you know, use a lowercase b. If you don't want to distinguish between one or the other or make one any more important than the other, use a lowercase w. You know what I mean? That way it keeps everything
Mm,
on a level
mm.
playing field, which gets the people to know, well, it's got to be a level playing field. Okay, here we go again. So you won't be able to satisfy everybody. So you just have to get to the point where okay, Black or African American for referring to those of us of color in the States is an okay term. And then just say, I'm just inquiring because I refer to people in this culture as African American. Is that okay with you? And if you want to just plain out ask someone, ask them. But,
Mm.
we could get stuck on the semantics of what to call people and whether it should be uppercase, lowercase.
Oh no, sorry.
It's going to be a rabbit hole. It's going to be a rabbit hole. And I realize that. And I realize while people are in this learning phase that you may find yourself in those situations where I don't know what to say. Just ask. If it's a reasonable person, just ask it. I am learning. And maybe it's in the way you approach it. I'm learning. And I want to preface that before I ask this question. I'm learning. and I'm
Mm,
asking because I want to know.
mm,
And just ask your question.
mm.
The response you get back, I think, will all be dependent and predicated on the question you ask and the way you ask
Yeah,
the question. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's completely driven by that. And again, there's some people I don't really care who they are. They're not going to talk to you. They're going to be like the fire hose. They're just like you ask a question, and they're like, ah, you won't get around that. And again, I keep telling
Mm.
you, 400 years, just keep
Yeah, yeah,
okay. I got it.
yeah.
Just back off from that. That's not the person. That's not the situation, and just go
Mm,
on. But I mean, there are people who are willing to answer the questions. But I mean, that is for me, it's Black African American. I'm fine with that. I know in some countries, Black is a term that's used, and that's okay if the people in that country are okay with it. I think people are just really starting to talk so much now until I think you'll start to hear people talk a little bit more about it, and they may be a little bit more willing to answer some questions.
mm.
But I'm telling you, you listen to everybody in your audience who is not African American. Please don't get frustrated by going down the rabbit hole trying to figure everything out. You will not be perfect.
Yeah.
You cannot. There is no
Mm,
perfection. There's only a journey of trial and error with this right now. For whatever you try to do, you're coming into something. For many of you who are just coming to the place of wanting to talk and realize and understand, you're not been here before. So give yourself some grace and don't try to get it perfect. And then seek out someone who will respond to you in a manner of grace so that they give you the room to make an error, if you will. You know what I mean? And room to ask questions and say, okay, I don't know. And then you may find in communities, you'll find some people who are going to be fireballs. You find some people who really will genuinely say, I'm glad you asked me that. Let me tell you what I think. There are many people who will do that. And this is a journey. This is a journey of exploration right now, Rachel,
mm,
honestly,
mm.
of aligning yourself to and with people whom you've never been aligned with before. This is a journey of exposing yourself, and when I say that, I mean in a positive manner, to things that you've never experienced before about another culture who's been here all the time, but you just don't know. This is a journey of exploration. Like I said on that live you heard me on, this is a lifelong marathon. It's not a one and done. It's not a one and done. And the people need to allow themselves the ability and the time and the grace. And I know I've said that word probably 1,000 times, but I think people will get it as they go along because you can't get it perfect. You're not gonna get it perfect, but just get started and do something. And I think along that journey, you will discover that somebody will meet you along the journey and say, "Hey, I'll talk to you. I'm here. I'm living
It's so
proof."
important because I know that a lot of people in my community have expressed the fact that they don't know what to say
Hmm.
and they're worried about saying the wrong thing and
Hmm.
then that paralyzes them, and but that is complicity. That's not an excuse anymore.
You can't take the posture of if somebody blows back, you just give up. I mean, if you're in relationships where there's friends or if you're married or stuff like that or your kids, you got to chastise your kids or something like that. You don't get mad and just throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is somewhat of a similar situation. It boils down to how badly do you really want to know the answer to the question? Because now the questions are uncomfortable. The conversations are uncomfortable. And I get that. And I hear that. And I get that's a lot of where people are coming from. You use the word complicity. You aren't comfortable. So because it makes you uncomfortable, you don't want to ask. But we've been uncomfortable for 400 years. Ask questions. Ask some questions. It's going to get you farther than trying to guess. And if you ask, you may get one thing from one person. I tell you, you might run down a couple rabbit holes. Be okay with that. Just take what you get and glean and say, okay, well, I know in this situation, it's probably more comfortable for me to do this. But if I don't, let me ask. Let me just ask.
And what else can we do? I have this great belief that midlife women in particular
Hmm.
can be incredibly powerful if we choose to step forward instead of stepping back.
Hmm.
And I think when I heard you on that Facebook Live, it was your authority that was so powerful. And I think a lot of women don't recognize that we do have a certain authority and clarity and experience and empathy, which the world needs.
Right, right,
But
right.
what can we all be doing?
I would advise people, and I've said this, and you've heard me say this before, and it really hasn't changed much. And it is, if you look around in your circle and everyone looks like you, then make an effort to change that. Make an effort to align yourself with one person in business, or make an effort to shop somewhere or communicate with someone who doesn't look like you. Make an effort to get to know and understand someone by something simple. I mean, just you're in the grocery store. I think you guys, we have grocery stores, and we tend to call things by the name of the stores. And I think you all may say, what do you say when you go shopping? What do you say when you go shopping? How do you
Maybe
refer to
shopping.
it? Just shopping? I think there's some term I've heard that kind of generalizes the whole concept of shopping. But see, I'm learning. I say it's a two-way street here. So, so I guess what I'm saying in that is when you go out, connect with someone in a way that you haven't connected before. I can tell you hundreds of times, thousands of times, an innumerable amount of times when I can walk up and down the street and people intentionally look the other way when I'm approaching, or they look down, or they look away, or do everything they can to not establish eye contact. And I know in cities like New York and stuff like that, it's kind of taboo. You know, you don't really do that in the city because it's just kind of invading my personal space. But when you're in the grocery store or some other places, wherever those places are that you find yourself and you are in proximity and it's something that you could do, stretch out and do something you haven't done before. Reach out to someone who doesn't look like you. Get to know them. I'm not saying you got to get into somebody's business, but the only way for you to break the ice is be willing to be the icebreaker. You got to do it. You got to take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to do one thing that I have not been doing. And you know subconsciously when you're out that you have subconscious thoughts about situations that you find yourself in. And I'm not saying sometimes you don't need to be careful. I'm not saying that. But there are some situations where you just blindly go into auto mode and you think things and you do things. So I'm telling you, just be an icebreaker. Be the icebreaker. Be the icebreaker. And do that thing, that one thing that you haven't been doing, whether it's in your friend circle or your business circle or your church circle or your civic circle or whatever the case you may find, wherever you may find yourself, be the icebreaker. Be the icebreaker. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Yes. Will you always get it right? No. Will you piss somebody off? Probably. But will you learn from someone? Absolutely. Could you run into somebody who genuinely will answer your question and you just walk away with, oh my God, I just learned something? Yes. You got to be willing to see the glass half full instead of immediately viewing it as half empty. It changes the way you look at people. It changes the way you view them. It changes the way you respond and not react to them. That's my message. Be the icebreaker.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.